Mr. Shaw this very inspirational feedback. Or should I say Dr. Shaw? I'm not sure. For the last committee, we're almost on time, about digital innovation and transformation. We have now Liz Maguire.
Hi everyone, thank you Jean-Luc. So we had a great time in the digital subcommittee, lots of interesting people, lots of different perspectives. And the thing we were primarily talking about is that heading there, a truly digitally enabled world. That's what we were focusing on for the last few days. So before we really got into the conversation, we talked about what's our digital vision, what are we hoping to achieve. And you can see there the themes that we've tied in from what we heard about the G20's vision. We believe very much it's about everybody, all sectors, all businesses. And we talked about our digital vision requiring integration, openness, and digital inclusion. So this little chart, I guess, first of all, we've all seen over the conversation the last few days that digital is everywhere. All the subcommittees, I think, have talked about digital in some shape or form. And we came into this conversation knowing that it was a very broad topic, that there was lots of things that we could cover. And you can see we've used this framework to kind of pull together what we think were the key things that we should be talking about. Not all of them ended up being items that we wanted to focus on. And I just want to quickly take you through some of the highlights of the things we did focus on. So, big conversation about digital connectivity and how we might drive a ubiquitous infrastructure. And so a lot of conversation around coverage, ensuring universal coverage for all, because you can't, without the basics being broadband, you can't access the internet, you can't use any digital devices. And one of our very strong recommendations is that governments need to focus on how can they accelerate the coverage targets. So at the moment we're on forecast for 71% of people to have access to mobile or fixed broadband by 2019, and we thought that was too slow. We thought 90% was going to be the right figure. Another important conversation we talked about was that we didn't want people who didn't have access to digital to be left behind, and so that there was a really big need for public internet services, be they terminals, be they Wi-Fi, to cover all citizens. The next thing for us was digital safety. We had lots of conversation about this, and you'll see here we came to the conclusion that actually we need a lot more conversation than just 3 days around some of those big topics of data ownership. Who owns data? And we found within our committee there was very different opinions depending on what country you came from, what industry you were involved in. We do know that infrastructure protection and cyber security are massively important and continue to receive a lot of focus around the world. We did think that there was a role of government in providing a unique digital identity to enable use of not just government services but for authentication. And we also thought it was very important for government to focus on educating citizens around safe digital working practices. Now, one of the things I talked about is when you look at fraud in the financial sector, digital fraud, a lot of it doesn't come because of a Yahoo hacking. It comes because someone thinks they've met the love of their life online and they're sending them money. And so until you can educate your citizens to say, actually don't send money to someone you've never met, you're not ever going to be able to stop that kind of fraud. Okay. 2 last areas of focus. Big one was around digital skill enablement, and this is getting citizens to really understand how to use new digital services. It's about preparing people for changes in skill sets as workforces are reallocated, as automation happens. And it's about, and that phrase we talked about really was digital displacement. People have been digitally displaced. And then the last thing for us was a lot of conversation around digital government and regulation. And our kind of favourite topic that came out of this was, what about if regulators created regulation like digital folks create digital services. What about if we had an agile approach to regulation? So that means co-creation with the people on the ground who have to use it. That means beta testing. So if we put it out and we get it wrong, then we can do it again. And we really thought that was something we wanted to encourage. Thanks.